So what we'll do is we'll discuss all the logistics of this process. We'll discuss the material or practical logistics. We'll also discuss the spiritual aspect of the process, the sort of work that we will be doing on a spiritual level. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the preparation that you might need to do. Obviously it's still early, but it allows you to still start getting your head around the whole thing. So we will now just start off with a little visualization to just get a sense of maybe, or get some more clarity as to why you're thinking about doing this process or what this process can bring. So we'll do 20 breaths to get us into that, and then we'll keep our eyes closed and do some of the visualization, and then we'll talk about all the other heady stuff. So let's start with closing our eyes. We'll start with a long deep breath, 4 short breaths, and 5 more. Just keep your eyes closed. Feel your physical body just as it is now. Just relax completely. Letting go of all the things you're holding onto on a physical level. Letting go of the emotions of the day, letting go of the prominent emotions of the last few days. Releasing any of the stresses still held in your body. Now just becoming aware of your emotions, the emotions that you want to release, as well as the emotions that feel uplifting, the emotions that feel like they carry you or inspire you. Just be aware of them and then let go completely with a long deep breath. Now letting the mind relax and let go, letting the mind become quiet. Letting any of the worries and doubts and preoccupations release. And now just expand your awareness, your consciousness, so that you become more aware and connected to your soul, so that you feel an expansion in your heart and body, an expansion so in your mind, the inner planes, the inner space opening up, becoming clear. Good. In a moment I'm going to count to 5, and on 5 you're going to see yourself on a road, walking a dirt road, walking through the fields, the countryside. But it feels very safe, it feels very open, expansive. Feels that your soul is more present with you in this space. So 1, 2, letting go of where you are now, letting go of your body. 3, 4, perhaps hearing some of the sounds, footsteps crunching on the earth, the gravel, the ground. And 5, now just really see and imagine yourself on this road. It doesn't need to be a specific road. You don't need to have a sense of where it is or what it's about. But just get a sense of you walking. Perhaps you notice that the sun is behind you, so you cast a long shadow on the ground in front of you. And this shadow is not just a dark space. The shadow kind of represents an archetype or an energy that you're walking with. And this may relate to some of your intentions, some of the reasons why you want to embark on this Camino. So perhaps you feel like a lightness, maybe your soul lifting you and carrying you from behind. And then this shadow that you cast onto the road is an archetype, a god or a goddess, an energy, an angel, some sort of supportive consciousness. And this energy represents the you that you are becoming, the you that you are walking towards. And just get a sense of walking on this road and seeing around you green fields, trees with broad canopies that bring shade and relief, the sound of birds. And as you keep walking, that feeling of freedom, that feeling of having let go of some stuff, some aspects of your personality, really carries you and holds you. And as you are aware that you've left some of the old stuff behind, some of the stuff that you no longer want to bear, at the same time, just feel with this shadow walking in front of you, with you, what some of the possibilities are in your life. Maybe it's a new state of being that you allow. Maybe it's some new aspects that you bring into your life. Maybe this Camino marks a boundary between the old and the new you. This Camino marks a clean slate. So get a sense of what it is that you're walking towards. The new inner states, the new emotions, as well as the new things that fill your life. Maybe new ways of being in relationships, or new ways of working, or new ways of being connected on a spiritual level. So as you keep walking, your soul kind of gently pushing you from behind, this archetype walking with you in the form of your shadow. As you keep walking, you enter a bank of mist that hangs heavily over the road. And as you enter this mist, you kind of enter the unknown. And you walk feeling safe, you walk trusting this road that leads you to your higher destiny. Soon you find yourself completely surrounded by this mist, completely engulfed. But it's a white mist, a light imbued mist. And then up ahead, just a little way, you see something starting to glow, or the shadow of something. And this is a symbol. This is a message from your higher self, from your archetype. It's telling you where you're headed. The symbol will somehow show you something about the bigger purpose of you doing this Camino. So maybe some sort of light that glows, or maybe it's an animal, or a building, some sort of other object that tells a story in some way. It doesn't need to make sense at first. Just see what's there, and as you go closer to it, as you explore it, study it a little bit more, it starts to become clearer. It starts to reveal more of its mystery, more of its wisdom. So spend that time examining it, spend that time interacting. Maybe it's not so much in what you see that you learn about it, but also in what you feel and pick up and sense. Maybe some other details reveal themselves. Might be a sound or a smell, might be a color, or a visual, or a word. What is this Camino about for you? Who are you becoming on this Camino? Bearing in mind, remembering that the Camino is a journey of self-discovery. It's a journey of deeper connection to your soul, to your chosen archetype, to your body. Give thanks now to that symbol that has been interacting with you, showing you something. You continue walking, the mist clears, and on the other side you enter a bright, sunny day. Given that the sun is higher up, towards midday by now, you notice that shadow, your archetype, is less long, it's more integrated. And maybe this also makes you feel a little bit different in some way. Maybe this makes you understand yourself or this journey in a different way. Let's just take a few long, deep breaths together. Just to go deeper. A few more breaths, and in so doing, feel whole and complete. Feel a sense of knowing and understanding, expansion. Good. There is so much more awaiting you. There's so much hope, so much opening for you. Give thanks to your soul, give thanks to your archetype. Give thanks to this road, this Camino, which has been calling you on some level. Start to wiggle fingers and toes. In so doing, start to come back, stretching arms and legs, opening eyes back here. So as I said, we'll cover the logistical aspects of the Camino today, and of course if you have any questions along the way, please do feel free to ask them as we go. I will of course also give time at the end, yeah, you know, it's of course the Camino, it's a very profound experience. It's an extremely profound experience of walking your talk, and I think that's one of the main factors that makes the Camino so special, is that, you know, we'll be doing, you know, meditation, we'll be doing breath work, we'll be doing rituals in certain places, but above all, it's through the walking that we process. It's through the walking that we develop a new relationship with ourselves. Of course, you know, it's not very often that we walk for 20 days, you know, doing between 12 and 25 kilometers a day. So it's really important to bear that factor in mind. It's almost like it's the walking itself that starts to get us into process. And then beyond that, it's the actual energy of the Camino. It's the energy of, you know, more than 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years of people using that road and having a spiritual intention around that road, because of course the Camino did exist before Christian times. That road to Finisterre, Finisterre in Spanish or in Latin originally means the end of the world, the end of the earth. And this town, this place of Finisterre, is the westmost part of continental Europe, except for England of course, or Ireland. But you know, they understood that was the westmost point on the continent, which represented the end of the world. And apart from that geographical aspect, also, you know, symbolically the people followed the stars, the Milky Way, to the end of the world. And the symbolism was to go to the end of the world in order to kind of die to the old self, and then to walk back and be reborn, you know, to walk back home. So that was like a pilgrimage of dying to the old, of being reborn to the new. And that theme of spiritual death, spiritual rebirth is, you know, the oldest and most profound in all spiritualities, I think, of all cultures in all ages. And that spiritual rebirth is walked, it's experienced by the body, it's a visceral experience. And always when we have these deep visceral experiences, that's when we really can make very intense change. So that action of walking, apart from the process that happens along the way, does represent kind of a dying on a visceral, physical level. So that when we go back home, and after all the other work that we'll have done on the Camino, you really do feel very new and very refreshed. So apart from the actual energy that the Camino holds, apart from the actual walking, which is an aspect of the processing, we will do the daily sessions. We'll do either meditation or breath work or other rituals in some of the different sacred places along the way. One of them is at the Cruz de Hierro, where we drop a stone or a pebble that represents the old self that we're letting go of. And we do another ritual in an old ruin of a Celtic town, you know, where there's a very interesting kind of spot, which would have been the sacred spot of that town. And then of course, you know, the churches also hold a lot of energy. And for me, you know, the churches aren't churches, the churches are temples. You know, probably those churches were built on energy points, on power points, on pagan temples that were there before. So those churches still hold that energy, and a lot of those churches have incredible energy, incredible power that they still maintain, again regardless of what your religion or your religious beliefs are. So there's a very deeply entrenched sacredness, not only in the geography of the Camino, but also in the places. I've also kind of laid out the plan for the Camino, the different towns that we sleep in, because in general those are the more attractive or interesting towns in different respects. So, you know, that's why we follow the particular itinerary that I've laid out. I've also tried to lay it out in such a way that we kind of alternate maybe a little bit of a heavier walking day with a little bit of a lighter walking day. You know, the beginning tends to be a little bit more flat. Then in the middle we kind of go up some steep mountains, and that mountainous area is absolutely magnificent. You know, we reach a point in Sebreiro where you have 360-degree views of the surrounding countryside. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And then the last third of the Camino is kind of more up and down, more hilly but less intense. So, you know, we kind of take into consideration the terrain as well. We try and have, you know, heavier days, you know, followed by lighter days. Also, more or less in the middle, we will stay in one of the towns, Villafranca, for 2 nights, because we'll just have a little bit of a break and a bit of a rest there. I will, you know, if you're interested, I will send you the walking itinerary as well, so that you've got a list of those names of towns. So the basic, you know, the basic principle of the Camino and how I run the Camino is that we obviously go as a group. It's more or less, you know, it's pretty much suggested to do the group sessions, which will usually be at about 6 p.m. in the town where we're supposed to sleep. 2 or 3 times we walk together as a group from the beginning, because we'll be doing our processing in the middle of the road or sort of along the way. But that said, my only real rule for the Camino is that we all sleep in the same town. Okay, so if you want to sleep in a 5-star hotel, that's your choice. If you want to sleep in a pilgrim's refuge, which is basically a dorm, that's really up to you, as long as we sleep in the same town, as long as we can then, of course, you know, see each other to do the processing at 6 p.m. Usually it's at 6 p.m. And then, you know, usually what we do is we have dinner together, and of course you're very free to either walk with other members of the group, or you're free to walk alone along the way. You know, it's very safe to walk alone on the Camino. So, you know, we're not going to be herded together and, you know, walking the whole day together and then, you know, doing activities at night together. It really will be up to how you want to do that. And that said as well, you know, some days you might feel that you're tired, and if you do want to take a taxi, or if you want to take a bus, just have a little bit of a rest, that's also absolutely fine. That's really up to you. You know, generally speaking, you know, once or twice it's quite nice to have a little bit of a rest in that way, because one does get very tired. You know, the fatigue accumulates in the body. Sometimes our feet get sore, or our thighs get sore, or whatever, and then it also becomes difficult to walk. So it's also nice to have a little bit of a rest. So you certainly don't lose kudos if you don't walk every single day of the way. So yeah, so sleeping in the same town is my only real rule, because if we don't kind of stick together, or if people lag, it actually starts to derail the process a little bit. And the people who are who maybe don't sleep in the same town as the rest of the group start to feel left out, or they feel out of sync, or they feel scared. So it's nice just to all stay together, so just bear that in mind. Apart from that, as I said, you really can stay where you want. I don't book the accommodation ahead of time. I do, generally speaking, book some of the places, and I will give recommendations for some of the places in some of the towns that you might want to book for yourself. In other places, I will book for the group. There's certain places that are a little bit off the road that I book for the group. And usually what will happen is if people haven't booked, the morning of or the evening before, I will check in with people, and I'll try and book for everyone, or book as a group. So generally speaking, there's no problems finding accommodation. Some of the nicer places might fill up, especially over weekends, but it's very easy to find accommodation, and it's really not an issue. Some of the towns, some of the places, I generally book on booking.com, where you can get a free cancellation option, so that if something changes along the way, we can also cancel, because that's another thing to bear in mind. Sometimes, very rarely, we have to change our walking schedule a little bit. It might be that something else comes up, something interesting happens along the way, and we decide to change the route a little bit. Or it might happen, as happened once, there was a conference in one of the towns, and I didn't know about that, and all the accommodation was booked up. So we just decided as a group to go to the next town. And therefore, for that reason, it is very important that everyone has their sort of phones and internet, so that we can stay in touch along the way. Speaking of the walking, then the walking is very powerful, and on the one hand it kind of really tires us, and when we get tired, our resistances are down, the resistances of the ego are down, and then that deeper processing can start to happen. With the breath work and the meditation processes that I'll run in the evening sessions, that helps kind of bring up some of the stuff, or heal some of the stuff, or bring further insight. Also, apart from the individual sessions, I do arrange the Camino around a bigger principle. So we work with the hero's journey. We work with kind of a bigger story, a bigger narrative based on the hero's journey, and also tying in some ways with the story told by the tarot cards, which is the story of the spiritual growth, the ego death, and then the spiritual rebirth of the hero. So there's kind of a bigger process, and in that manual that I will provide, there'll be more information about those cards, those archetypes, and also sort of daily maybe journaling questions, or little small processes you can do for yourself during the day to just understand better yourself, understand better the process as it unfolds. And of course, you can do as much or as little of that as you want. That's just something to enhance your journey. And then in terms of the actual, I guess the main thrust of the personal process for the Camino will be you working with an archetype, or a god or a goddess, or a being that represents the person that you want to become in your life. Why are you doing the Camino, and what do you want to change in your life, or what do you want to see in your life after the Camino? And answering that question for yourself will kind of determine what sort of archetype you work with. So for example, let's say you want greater spiritual enlightenment, after the Camino, then you might work with a god or a goddess of light. So you might work with Apollo in the Greek mythology, or you might work with a Shakti energy in Hindu mythology. Maybe you want to bring in a relationship, so then you might call in the goddess Hera or the goddess Aphrodite, depending on what sort of love relationship you want. And then of course there's various other different intentions that we'll work with. So the first real question to ask yourself and to think about is who or what do you want to be after you've done the Camino? And then from there we can work backwards and see what supportive energy will help you create that in your life. Because when we work with this archetype, when we invoke this archetype, we're actually kind of calling in a powerhouse of energy that already exists, and we are kind of allowing ourselves or opening ourselves to learn from that archetype, to download some of that power of the archetype, to give us the kickstart, to make it possible for us to really live that. And of course, what we'll be doing is we'll really be working with walking that archetype day to day. And as we walk that archetype, that kind of gets walked into our body, and therefore gets walked into our subconscious, and therefore into our lives afterwards. So that work with the archetype is very powerful. Again, it'll be 20 days of immersive work with that archetype, and that of course will make very, very tangible change possible afterwards. So that's kind of one of the fun aspects of the process. Also very profound working with the archetype, but it's also a fun aspect. It also allows us to think out of the box, to see and perceive ourselves and our lives differently. And I think that's one of the things in general about the Camino, is that space of 20 days is a separate space in your life. It's kind of doing something a little bit different to probably what you've ever done in your life before. It's not a long hike or a long trek that you're doing. Again, it's very rare that I imagine that you would have done a 20-day journey. And it's a trek or a hike or a Camino on this sacred path in a foreign country, in a different culture, with a sacred intention. So all of those factors kind of create the space, that spans that 20 days, that is very separate and very other. And in that otherness, you can then find other ways of being, other ways of seeing and understanding yourself and your life. So it kind of creates the space for you to rehearse through your walking, through being in this space, rehearse being something and someone different. And then, of course, when you go back home, you've already done some deep integration there, so that that new person that you've become, or that person that you've really rediscovered or excavated, can then have more hold in your life afterwards. So it's a very beautiful process of really giving yourself an opportunity to be something different, and to change and to transform on a very powerful level. Another factor that people always ask about or wonder about is, how super fit do you need to be? And you really don't need to be super fit for this, to do this Camino. Yes, you do need to do some training, a little bit of practice, getting used to walking in your shoes, maybe getting used to walking with a bag, but you don't need to be super fit. And 20 kilometers a day for most people is quite doable. It's not too crazy, and of course along the way you can have rests, and you can have coffee and have lunch. So it is kind of very doable. And of course, if you find your limit is 15 kilometers, and after 15 kilometers you're exhausted, then of course you can also take a taxi for the last 5 or whatever, and then you're really not missing out too much if you do that. Some people are very strict with themselves, and they really want to push themselves through and do everything, and that's great. And then other people are a little bit less strict, and that's also fine. The mere fact that you're getting out of your comfort zone and sort of really walking through the stuff is what it's about, and that's enough. Now, regarding the backpacks, some people are strict about wanting to carry their backpack every step of the way, and some people like to send the backpacks on to the next town, and that also is really up to you. It's not too difficult to send the backpack to the next town, or where we'll be sleeping. It's very safe. I've never had any cases of backpacks getting lost or stuff stolen out of it. And not having to carry the backpack does make a very big difference. It makes a difference to how your legs feel, it makes a difference to your blisters in general. So it really does make things a whole lot lighter. If you do opt to not carry your backpack, you should take a light day pack with you as well, to maybe put some snacks in, to put your water in, and maybe just some other valuables that you want to keep on yourself. Usually it costs about €7 to use one of the transport services, €7 per trip. Sometimes, if the whole group decides they want to do it, we can get one taxi just to take all the bags, and that costs about €25 for the taxi. So that's also something that we can do, that also makes a little bit lighter in some way. But again, some people are very strict and they say, no, I'm absolutely going to carry my backpack. And that's fine, but that's a personal choice. And then of course, while we're still on the backpacks, what to take. Of course, it's always good to travel as light as possible. They say that your backpack should weigh about 10% of your body weight. That's quite extreme. That's very light. But generally speaking, what you need for the walk, and I will send you a sort of a checklist to give you the information. Generally speaking, I would say it's 2 pairs of pants, 2 t-shirts, 1 kind of fleece sweater, and your pants might be the sort of zip-off leg pants that you can start off in the morning when it's cool. You start off with long pants, and then when it gets hotter you can just zip off the legs, and then you've got shorts. And you might want to take 1 pair of light leggings for when it's very cold. And then apart from your sweater, you might want to, you should definitely take like a windbreaker. It doesn't need to be a thick jacket, but just a light windbreaker that you could put over your fleece top, so that you can warm up. It can get cool, it can be cool in the morning, it can be cool in the evening. So you do need to have a warmer option, especially in Galicia, the sort of last third of the trip. We go into the mountains and it tends to be more rainy. You need a poncho, a rain poncho, and of course socks, underwear, and then shoes. I suggest taking 2 pairs of shoes, 1 pair of sandals, those sort of Velcro sandals that are quite light, and then a pair of closed shoes. And they definitely don't need to be hiking boots. They don't need to be those heavy leather hiking boots. I suggest, just a good walking sort of sneaker that offers good support, but that's not too heavy, that breathes well. Don't forget, your feet are going to get very hot, and you want your feet to feel as light and as breathable as possible. I tend to walk about 3/4 of the way in my sandals. The sandals are very comfortable, they're light, your feet don't get too sweaty, and obviously when your feet get very sweaty, then it's easier to form blisters. So I just find the sandals to be very nice. But on some days you will need your other shoes, but again, the emphasis should be on light items. Apart from that, you don't really need to take a sleeping bag or a sleeping sheet, except if you will opt to sleep in the dormitories, the pilgrims' refuges. Basically every town will have a pilgrim's refuge, which is between €7 and €15 a night. Some of them are gorgeous, some of them are really basic, and they tend Sometimes they provide pillowcases and sheets and blankets, but if you're not going to opt for that, I would suggest you don't need to take any sheets or sleeping bags. We will sleep in one albergue or pilgrim refuge one of the nights, only one as a group, and then from there it will be your choice. The hotels, they, generally speaking, if it's a single room that you stay alone in, it's about 35 to 60 euros a night per person. Very often there are hotel rooms with 2 beds, 2 single beds, or a triple with 3 beds, and those come to about 15 to 20 per person if you share that room. So it really is quite economical, and of course you can share with people along the way, people in our group. So that also becomes an option later on. So the accommodation, given that it's in Europe, really isn't very expensive, and the hotels are they're nice and comfortable. Of course you've got bedding, and you get a towel, which is such a luxury. When you stay in the dormitories, your towels are kind of wet all the time, and you've got to lug a little bit of extra luggage, and sometimes you don't sleep so well because of the snorers. So maybe a sensible way is to alternate a little bit between hotels and dormitories. Again, some of the pilgrims refuges are very nice, and I can suggest the ones that I recommend, but some of them are a little bit big and a little bit basic. So food, pretty much, basically every town will have a restaurant or a place where one can eat. And along the way they've got the pilgrim's menu, which is a set menu of 3 courses and a drink, and those cost between 10 and 14 euros generally. And usually having one pilgrim's menu a day, and then having like a sandwich for lunch, or buying some stuff for lunch to make your own sandwiches is quite nice. And then usually along the way one drinks copious amounts of coffee and croissants, usually for breakfast. That's one of the joys of the Camino. So for food you're generally looking at about 25 euros a day, sort of for one pilgrim's menu, for a sandwich, and then for a few coffees along the way. So again, that's also quite economical. It also depends on your budget, and there really are options for all budgets. So that's also quite easy. You don't need to lug lots of food around with you. And quite a few times along the way, we'll pool together as a group. Buy some cheese and some chorizo and some bread and some tomatoes, and sort of just pool together and make a picnic, which is always a lot of fun, and it's always very delicious because we get to taste the local cheeses and chorizos and so forth. So that's also a lot of fun. And then of course, just to go back to the backpack, the main heavy items of course are the toiletries. In theory you only need toothpaste, toothbrush, brush, and a few extras, maybe some deodorant and some sunscreen and maybe a cream here and there. But that, again, that's in theory. It's really hard to strip down that much. And one of the kind of processes in mindfulness along the way is to try and strip your luggage down as much as possible, to carry as little as possible. That said, one of the wonderful services that the Camino offers is that you can mail your extra luggage from where we'll be starting in Leon to Santiago. So, for example, if you're going to be in Europe a few days before or after the Camino, Obviously, you're not going to only have 2 t-shirts and 2 pairs of pants. So then what you can do is, all those extra items, all of those things that you will be needing for travel before and after, you can stick in a box, or you can mail one of your suitcases to Santiago, to the post restaurant there, and your stuff will wait for you there for when you arrive in Santiago. Which means that, in Lyon, on the first day when we're there, we will, as a group, go and mail off that stuff together, and then it'll wait for us in Santiago, and that means that we can then sort of try and travel very light along the way. So that does also make life a whole lot easier. Apart from that, the real beauty of the Camino is all that you need to do is walk. There's lots of other pilgrims along the way, people to meet. Of course, us in the group, we do become very close, and we sort of have lots of fun together. And of course, we go on a deep personal journey, all of us in our own ways, but also as a group. And when we are in a group together, working on the same process together, of course, that creates a wonderful mirror for us to understand ourselves, to understand others, and to sort of go deeper into that journey. One of the reasons why I decided to create this Camino process is because, yes, of course, you can do the Camino without, being in a group, without following a process. But, sometimes if you do it alone, and if you don't have some sort of spiritual process to follow, there is the temptation to, for example, soldier on and just make it about the walking and, get to the next town as quickly as possible. Or, sometimes, some of the more sacred places elude you because, you're not aware of where they are. And also, the process that I run kind of brings out some of the spiritual aspects of the journey, so that we can really expand those and work with them and really learn from each other and from that sort of spiritual connection. So this process really is designed to be something that helps you bring out the best in yourself, to become a better version of yourself, with the help of your archetype, with the help of the group and the process. And apart from that, also just to have a real experience of beauty, a real experience of focus on the spiritual, so that afterwards your life can change. Afterwards you can have this clean slate in order to kind of create the life like you would like it to be afterwards. So that's the Camino in a nutshell. We'll stay in touch. I'll send you more information. Just write to me if you want the checklist, if you want the list of different towns, and maybe just let me know what to what degree you think you will be joining the group, so we can just start to get a sense of how many people will be coming. Thanks for joining, everyone. Thank you. Have a lovely day further.